What is the right response when someone betrays you? Do you strike back or do you rise above it? Betrayal cuts deeper than almost any wound. It is not just the loss of trust, but the shattering of the story you believed about another person and perhaps even about yourself. A friend exposes your secret, a partner chooses someone else, a colleague undermines you to advance their own career. In that moment, you feel the ground beneath you break open. Anger rushes in. A burning desire to make them feel the same pain you now carry. And yet, the Stoics warned against this impulse. Seneca once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Those words may feel impossible in the heat of betrayal, when your dignity feels stolen and your heart demands justice, but hidden within them is a radical strength. The idea that your character, your integrity, and your inner calm are greater victories than any form of retaliation. In this journey, you will see how Stoicism, blended with the insights of modern psychology, can turn betrayal from a scar into a source of unshakable calm. Part 1: The Invisible Wound: Why Betrayal Feels Like a Loss of Self. Betrayal is not just an event, it is an earthquake inside your soul. You know this because when it happens, it is rarely the act itself that devastates you, but the collapse of trust that follows. Modern psychology describes betrayal as a form of trauma because it strikes at the foundation of your relationships, the very place where you felt safe. When someone you trusted violates that bond, it feels like a part of you has been stolen. Trust, after all, is not a simple agreement. It is the invisible bridge that connects your inner world to another. When that bridge collapses, you are left questioning not only the other person, but your own judgment, your worth, even your identity. This is why betrayal hurts so deeply. It is as though someone has reached into your chest and torn away the certainty you once carried. The Stoics understood this pain well. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that you should never be surprised by the actions of others, for people act according to their nature, not yours. And yet, even with such wisdom, you still feel the sting. Imagine, for example, confiding in a close friend about your fears, trusting them with a secret you would never dare reveal publicly. Then days later, you hear whispers, laughter, and see the private words you entrusted spread like wildfire. It is not only humiliation that grips you, but also the realization that what you thought was sacred between you has been discarded so casually. Your first instinct is rage. How could they? Why me? But beneath the anger lies grief. Betrayal is at its core a kind of mourning, the loss of the relationship as you once knew it. Psychologists have shown that betrayal activates the same parts of the brain as physical pain. This is why your chest tightens, your stomach churns. Your hands tremble when you recall the event. Your body does not distinguish between a punch and a broken promise. And in that space of pain, your mind starts spiraling. You replay the moments, analyze the details, look for signs you missed, as if solving the puzzle might undo the outcome. But the more you replay it, the deeper the wound seems to burrow. Here, Stoicism offers a first step: acceptance of reality. Epictetus taught that you should focus only on what is within your control, and betrayal, once committed, is no longer in your control. You cannot unsay their words, undo their choice, or erase the act. What you can control is your response, and in choosing wisely, you take back power. This is not easy. It is far simpler to lash out or cut ties in fury. But if you pause, you begin to see that the real injury is not what the betrayer did, but how you let their actions define you. Consider the example of Malala Yousafzai, who survived an assassination attempt at the hands of those who betrayed her right to education. She could have sunk into hatred, consumed by the desire for revenge. Instead, she transformed her pain into advocacy, becoming a global voice for children's rights. Her strength was not in striking back, but in refusing to let betrayal make her bitter. She became greater than her wound, and so must you. The hurt you feel is proof of your humanity, but it does not have to dictate your destiny. Your first lesson is this: betrayal wounds you by stealing trust. But you heal by choosing not to let it steal your character. To feel pain is natural, but to become pain is a choice. In that space between the act and your response, you discover the beginnings of Stoic revenge, not retaliation, but transformation. Part 2: The Sweet Trap of Revenge, Why Retaliation Feels Inevitable. When you are betrayed, the urge for revenge rises quickly and almost irresistibly. It feels natural, like fire following a spark. Neuroscience explains this impulse with clarity. When you imagine or act out revenge, your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward. That momentary fantasy of getting even lights up your mind in the same way winning a prize does. You feel a rush. A fleeting satisfaction that whispers, "This will make the pain go away." But here lies the trap. Like sugar, the sweetness of revenge is temporary. Once the high fades, you are left with the same wound, now complicated by new consequences of your retaliation. You might burn bridges you once needed, damage your own reputation, or even regret the person you became in the process. The Stoics saw this centuries before science could prove it. Epictetus advised, "When someone does you wrong, immediately consider what judgment led him to do it." He was pointing you away from blind reaction toward understanding. The one who wronged you acted from ignorance, fear, greed, or weakness. Their act reflects them, not you. Yet if you respond in kind, you absorb their flaws into yourself. Your enemy does not only harm you once, they succeed in reshaping your soul. Imagine a colleague at work who undercuts you in front of others, perhaps taking credit for your idea. Your chest tightens with humiliation, and immediately you picture ways to strike back, exposing their lies, sabotaging their project, gossiping about their flaws. The fantasy feels satisfying for a moment, but pause and look deeper. By lowering yourself into the same pit, you confirm their narrative. The office becomes a battlefield of petty blows, and in the end, no one emerges respected. Your dignity, once intact, is now entangled with their game. This is the bitter truth. Revenge rarely restores what was lost. Instead, it multiplies the damage. Psychology reinforces this insight. Research shows that people who pursue revenge often feel worse in the long run. Instead of closure, they experience rumination, the constant replaying of the offense and their own response. The mind loops endlessly, keeping the wound open. Foregoing revenge, however, interrupts this cycle. It allows your brain to disengage, to move forward instead of circling back. You are not excusing the wrong, but you are refusing to let it chain you to the past. Consider Martin Luther King Jr. Throughout the civil rights movement, he and his community endured relentless betrayal, broken promises from leaders, violent opposition from authorities, and systemic injustice at every turn. He could have answered hatred with hatred, but instead he chose nonviolence and moral courage. King believed that responding to cruelty with cruelty would only perpetuate the cycle, while restraint would reveal the moral bankruptcy of the oppressor. His choice not to retaliate transformed him into a global symbol of dignity and hope. His life proves that revenge may feel instinctual, but dignity is far more enduring. And so you must ask yourself, when the surge of revenge grips you, will you feed it and let it consume you, or will you master it and let it pass? The Stoic path reminds you that the strongest victory is not over your enemy, but over the storm within. Part 3: How Retaliation Diminishes You, the Stoic Truth About Revenge. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best way to avenge yourself is not to become like the wrongdoer." These words cut to the heart of the Stoic view. Revenge does not elevate you, it diminishes you. When you strike back, you do not erase the betrayal, you echo it. Instead of protecting your dignity, you surrender it to the very person who injured you. Revenge is not a restoration of justice. It is a concession that someone else has the power to dictate your behavior. The Stoics believed that true strength is found not in retaliation, but in remaining faithful to your character when tested. Think of revenge as a mirror. When you lash out, you are reflecting the qualities of the person who hurt you, their malice, their dishonesty, their cruelty. In becoming like them, you allow their poison to seep into your life. The Romans had a saying, "Anger is a brief madness." In those moments of fury, you are no longer guided by reason but by impulse. You believe you are punishing the other, but in reality, you are punishing yourself, eroding your calm, damaging your reputation, and surrendering your peace of mind. Modern psychology supports this Stoic wisdom. Research in emotional regulation shows that revenge feeds cycles of hostility. When you act out of spite, your nervous system remains on high alert, your cortisol levels rise. Your body stays locked in stress. Instead of closure, you experience agitation, sleepless nights, and mental exhaustion. Revenge binds you to the betrayer like a chain. They occupy your thoughts, influence your actions, and even shape your identity. By contrast, choosing not to retaliate allows the nervous system to settle, signaling to your mind and body that you are no longer under threat. In this calm, healing becomes possible. Consider the example of Michelle Obama. During her years in the White House, she endured waves of personal attacks, cruel caricatures, and false rumors. She had every opportunity to strike back publicly, to retaliate against her critics. Instead, she chose dignity. Her famous phrase, "When they go low, we go high," captured the essence of Stoic revenge. By refusing to descend into the ugliness of her detractors, she not only protected her integrity, but also inspired millions who saw in her restraint a higher form of strength. The critics eventually faded, but her character endured. The lesson is clear: revenge weakens you because it pulls you out of alignment with your best self. It takes you away from reason, away from virtue, away from peace. The person who wronged you may win a moment of satisfaction, but you lose something far greater if you abandon your principles. Stoicism urges you to ask, do you want to be remembered for your bitterness or for your dignity? When you choose not to become like your enemy, you win a battle they can never touch, the battle for your soul. Part 4, Lincoln's lesson, turning betrayal into opportunity. History often gives us powerful reminders that dignity outlasts vengeance. One striking example is Abraham Lincoln. Throughout his presidency, he was mocked, insulted, and betrayed not only by enemies but also by members of his own party. Political rivals spread rumors, ridiculed his appearance, and questioned his competence. In a time of civil war, when the stakes could not have been higher, he faced constant betrayal from those who sought to undermine his leadership for their own gain. The natural impulse would have been to humiliate these detractors, to remove them from influence, or to respond in kind with words as sharp as theirs. Yet Lincoln chose another path. Instead of seeking revenge, he practiced what we could call Stoic revenge. He refused to let betrayal make him small. Lincoln's approach mirrored the advice of Marcus Aurelius, who urged himself to remember that other people's faults arise from ignorance, not from reason. Lincoln famously appointed his fiercest political rivals to his cabinet, forming what later became known as his team of rivals. He understood that by including them, he was strengthening the nation rather than feeding his ego. His restraint often puzzled his contemporaries, who expected him to retaliate. But Lincoln was more interested in unity than in personal vindication. When someone once criticized him for speaking kindly of his enemies instead of destroying them, he replied, "Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" This attitude transformed betrayal into opportunity. and revealed that true power lies not in striking back, but in rising above. Modern psychology helps us understand why Lincoln's response was so effective. By reframing betrayal not as a personal attack to be avenged, but as human weakness to be understood, he preserved his emotional balance. Psychologists describe this as cognitive reappraisal, the ability to reinterpret a painful situation in a way that reduces emotional distress. Instead of stewing in bitterness, Lincoln shifted perspective, asking what could be gained rather than what was lost. This not only protected his mental health, but also allowed him to channel his energy toward constructive leadership. You can apply the same principle in your own life. Imagine someone at work spreads a rumor about you, hoping to sabotage your reputation. Your first instinct may be to retaliate, to expose their flaws or humiliate them in turn, but consider how much stronger it would be to respond as Lincoln did. You stay calm, you continue doing excellent work, and you refuse to let gossip pull you into the mud. Over time, the truth speaks louder than lies. Others notice your composure, and the betrayer's character reveals itself without your intervention. In choosing restraint, you not only preserve your peace but also earn respect that revenge could never buy. This is the essence of Stoic revenge, not striking back but living so well, so wisely, that the betrayal becomes powerless. Like Lincoln, you defeat your betrayer not by becoming like them, but by becoming greater than the wound they tried to inflict. Part 5: The Quiet Power of Integrity, Overcoming Workplace Betrayal. Betrayal is not confined to the grand stage of history or politics. More often, it takes root in the everyday spaces of life, your workplace, your friendships, even your family. Imagine a situation that many people know too well. A colleague you trusted, someone you collaborated with closely, suddenly uses your ideas to advance themselves. You walk into a meeting and hear them presenting your work as if it were entirely their own. You feel your stomach drop, your face flush. Around the table, eyes turn toward them with admiration, and no one knows the truth. In that moment, the desire to expose them, to humiliate them in return, roars inside you. Yet what would revenge achieve? You could confront them publicly and perhaps tarnish their reputation, but the office becomes a battlefield. The tension spreads. Trust evaporates, and soon everyone is watching not the work but the drama. This is how betrayal poisons environments. When you retaliate in anger, you confirm the very cycle your betrayer began. Instead of standing apart, you become entangled. Stoicism offers a different path. Hold your ground, remain steady, and let time reveal the truth. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. In practice, this means continuing to act with integrity, even when others do not. By doing so, you allow their dishonesty to expose itself while your consistency strengthens your reputation. Psychology explains why this strategy is so powerful. Studies on workplace conflict show that retaliation rarely leads to justice. Instead, it damages team cohesion and often backfires against the retaliator. On the other hand, employees who respond with professionalism and patience are perceived as more trustworthy and resilient. In other words, when you resist the urge to lash out, you protect not only your inner peace but also your external credibility. Over time, people notice patterns. The one who cuts corners or steals credit eventually reveals their character, and the one who stays composed continues producing quality work and refuses to be drawn into pettiness earns respect that cannot be stolen. Consider the story of Sheryl Sandberg, former COO of Meta. In her early career, she faced environments where people attempted to sideline her or minimize her contributions. Rather than retaliating or letting anger consume her, she focused on building competence and resilience. She later wrote that we cannot change what we are not aware of, and once we are aware, we cannot help but change. Her strength came not from destroying her detractors, but from becoming so effective and composed that their attempts to undermine her faded into irrelevance. So when you face betrayal in your own daily life, remember, you are not powerless. You may not control their actions, but you do control your response. Every time you choose restraint, you weaken their influence. Every time you act with integrity, you strengthen your own standing. And in the quiet dignity of that choice, you practice the truest form of revenge, living above the level of those who tried to pull you down. Part 6: Reframe, Master, Redirect, a Stoic blueprint for betrayal. If betrayal is inevitable in human life, then what matters most is not how to avoid it, but how to respond when it comes. The Stoics offer a set of strategies that remain as practical today as they were 2,000 years ago. They are not abstract ideals, but tools you can carry into your daily life, especially in moments when the sting of betrayal tempts you to lash out. These strategies can be thought of as three movements: reframe, self-mastery, and redirect. Together, they form a path that turns betrayal into an opportunity for strength. The first movement is reframe. Epictetus insisted that people are not disturbed by events themselves, but by the judgments they make about those events. When you are betrayed, your instinct is to interpret it as a reflection of your worth. I must not be good enough, or they would not have done this to me. But what if you reframe it? What if you see their betrayal as evidence of their weakness, not your inadequacy? Modern psychology calls this cognitive reframing, and studies show it can drastically reduce emotional pain. By shifting the lens, you take back control of the narrative. Instead of carrying shame, you recognize the act as a mirror of the betrayer's character, not of your own value. The second movement is self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily reminders to himself to remain the same man in sorrow and in joy, in betrayal and in praise. To the Stoics, mastery over the self was the highest victory. Betrayal tests your composure, your patience, and your principles. Do you let anger command you, or do you command yourself? Psychologists describe this as emotional regulation, the ability to pause, breathe, and respond with intention rather than impulse. Self-mastery does not mean ignoring pain, it means feeling it fully without letting it dictate your actions. In practicing this, you deny your betrayer the power to shape your character. The third movement is redirect. Betrayal leaves a vacuum of energy. You feel restless, consumed by thoughts of what happened. Left unchecked, this energy festers into resentment, but if you redirect it, you transform it. Instead of investing energy in plotting retaliation, you pour it into growth. You focus on becoming better at your craft, deepening your relationships with those who are loyal, and strengthening your inner life. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth, the ability to turn adversity into a catalyst for development. What was meant to break you becomes fuel to elevate you, and so it is with you. Reframe betrayal as their weakness, not your failure. Practice self-mastery, refusing to let anger dictate your path. Redirect your energy toward building a life so strong, so dignified, that betrayal becomes irrelevant. In this, you embody the true Stoic strategy, turning harm into harmony, pain into power, betrayal into unshakable calm. Part 7: Silent Strength, Daily Practices to Rise Above Betrayal. When betrayal strikes, theory alone is not enough. You need practical ways to steady yourself, to resist the pull of revenge, and to transform pain into growth. The Stoics understood this, which is why their philosophy is filled with exercises designed not for abstract debate, but for daily living. One of the most powerful practices begins with writing. Seneca advised that each night you should review your day, examining your thoughts and actions as if you were both judge and student. When betrayal wounds you, take a notebook and write without censoring. Put on paper the raw anger, the disappointment, the grief. Then ask yourself the Stoic question: does this truly diminish me or only reveal the smallness of the one who wronged me? Writing clears the fog, showing you that the betrayal, while painful, cannot touch your inner worth unless you consent. The next practice is deliberate silence. In moments of hurt, the urge to shout, to defend, to retaliate feels overwhelming. But silence chosen consciously is not weakness, it is strategy. The Stoics prized the art of withholding reaction because silence denies your enemy the drama they crave. Modern psychology echoes this. Studies on conflict show that pausing before responding reduces emotional escalation and prevents regret. By choosing silence, you buy yourself time. You let the heat of anger cool and you allow truth to surface on its own. Your betrayer expects you to lash out. When you remain composed, you disarm them entirely. A further practice is self-questioning. Marcus Aurelius often asked himself whether the opinions of others truly harmed him or whether the harm came from his own judgment of those opinions. When betrayed, ask, am I truly damaged or am I choosing to see myself as damaged? What remains under my control? What remains untouched? Usually you find that your dignity, your capacity for reason, and your ability to act with virtue are still intact. Betrayal may bruise your trust, but it cannot steal your character unless you hand it over. You can also practice redirection through ritual. Take the energy of betrayal and anchor it in constructive habits, exercise, learning, creating. When you run, lift, paint, or build, you prove to yourself that you are not trapped by the wound. This is not avoidance, but transformation. Psychologists describe it as behavioral activation. When you channel energy into meaningful activity, your mood and sense of agency rise. In time, what felt like poison becomes fuel for progress. Think of Maya Angelou. She endured betrayal and trauma throughout her life, yet instead of letting silence suffocate her, she chose creative silence, turning pain into poetry, betrayal into art. Her words became a voice for millions. You may not write poetry for the world, but you can create strength for yourself. So when you are betrayed, do not let reaction rule you. Write, reflect, remain silent, redirect. These are not small acts, they are victories. Revenge shouts but fades. Dignity whispers but endures. And in practicing these simple disciplines, you discover that the truest revenge is not in striking back, but in standing so firmly in your calm that betrayal loses its power altogether. The power of Stoic revenge. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be unlike your enemy. These words capture the heart of Stoic revenge. You do not win by striking back, you win by refusing to become what hurt you. Betrayal will come to you in many forms, through broken promises, disloyalty, or deceit. But each time it arrives, it presents a hidden gift, the chance to prove that your character is stronger than circumstance. When you resist the impulse to retaliate, you deny your betrayer the satisfaction of shaping who you are. You become the author of your response, the master of your emotions, the guardian of your dignity. The call now is simple but profound. The next time betrayal tempts you into anger, pause, write down your feelings, sit in silence, and ask yourself whether striking back would truly lift you up, or whether it would only chain you to the one who wronged you. Then choose the higher road. Let your composure speak louder than their cruelty. Let your calm be the rebuke they cannot escape. If these ideas resonate with you, share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, indifference and dignity are your strongest weapons. In silence, you win.